Hello. Or who's hosting? And we don't even know who's hosting at this point. Is it Liz? Who is it?
We're just like, who's speaking first? Because I'm pretty sure it's
somebody
me.
go.
Somebody go. All right. I guess I'll go. Welcome, everyone. This is the End Zone Scoop. I am Dayna. That's Liz. That's Shona. And we've been gone for a couple of weeks. We were on vacations and working and busy. And so we haven't been around, ladies, since before the Super Bowl.
Yeah, my
So
God.
let's start there. Shona, what did you think of the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I was kind of glad the oh my God, why their name is just literally slipped my head. The Chiefs won. I thought like the Eagles were really good in the first half, and they proved like why they got to the Super Bowl anyway. With the quarterback Hurts, he's incredible. But I just feel like Mahomes just had that little extra class in the second half that the Eagles just couldn't seem to respond to. And the guy was playing like a high ankle sprain. Like, is he like, iRobot? Like, is he going to turn around one day and be like, you know what? I'm actually half human, half man. Maybe. Who knows?
Maybe.
I was quite glad, and like just because I am from like my team is from the NFC, I prefer it when the AFC win if my team is not there. So that's what I'm going with. But I thought it was a really, really good game overall. Like I know there was a lot of controversy with they say the referees like helped the Chiefs win, but I kind of get sick of this argument because you didn't win because your team wasn't good enough on the day. Like that's just the way it's the cookie crumbles, unfortunately. And yeah, sometimes ref decisions don't go your way, but you've got to be better as it is, like before that even has to come into the equation of refereeing decisions. In my mind.
Right.
And I think the Chiefs have still got a really good team for next year. Like it's incredible. I wouldn't surprise me if they're there or thereabouts next season. Although I hope the Bills get there. Come on.
I will tell you, I got so freaking annoyed. But I live in Kansas City, right? And so thank God, I was on a ship in the middle of the ocean when the Super Bowl happened. So I'm like, whatever. I don't have to deal with the hoopla of the parade because it really does shut down the whole entire town. And so that's kind of annoying if you don't want to go to the parade. But I will tell you what drove me crazy about this. What drove me crazy was after. When Travis Kelce, who you know, guys, how much I love Travis Kelce, and which I don't, and a bunch of the players were like, everyone counted us out. No one said we would be winners this year. I'm like, who? Everybody, you were at the top of every single list at the beginning of the season. Who don't listen? I'm all for teams having chip on their shoulders. Don't make it up. Like no one, you were like the Super Bowl favorites forever. It was so annoying to me. And now, God help us all, Travis Kelce is going to be on Saturday Night Live on tomorrow.
I will not be tuning in.
I will not be.
I hate him so much.
I know, Liz, you like Travis Kelce. I just
thought they were like,
big time like this for Travis Kelce.
I love how they were like as well, like, oh, this Super Bowl is making history. We've got like 2 black NFL quarterbacks, which is amazing. And they're like, and it's the first dual brother bowl. And I'm like, are people forgetting we had the Harbaugh Bowl? Like, are they just completely? Is that just like
the players? Yeah.
I'm like,
whatever.
Let's not pretend it's the first Brother Bowl we've had because I'm like, it bloody isn't.
I know. Liz, what did you think? Were you happy with the outcome? I know you love the Travis Kelce.
I wanted Eagles to win that one just because I like Jason Kelce. If I was gonna go for Kelce Ball, I was all in on Jason. It was a weird one. So it was like 5 a.m. for me in India, so that was a really nice early start. And I think after Patrick Mahomes had like his injury, like I was a bit like, is this possibly game over here? So I went down to breakfast at 7 a.m, took my phone to keep the game on with me. And obviously then it started to change around again. So I was like, okay, so they're still in it. This isn't game over here. So yeah, it was close. And I think it was just kind of like fair play to Chiefs for like, yeah, not going down basically. Like fair play.
They didn't give up. Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't give up all. So I mean, they deserved to win, but I just would have liked the Eagles to have won it. I think they just had the like. I don't know. I suppose maybe the more obvious storyline of the season that they'd had kind of felt like it would have been a nice way to end it. But yeah, Yeah. I've got to say though, having gone through that whole Kelsey Bowl experience, it makes me. I love their podcast now. Like I love listening to that. That is so much fun. So yeah. If there was one good thing to come out of Super Bowl, it was the Kelsey Bowl. The Kelsey Bowl. Their podcast was all season, but I've just figured it out now. So yeah.
I've said this a million times on all the different podcasts that I do, that Jason Kelsey is one of my favorite players in the NFL. He's my favorite interview I've ever done. He just is fantastic. And so I was real sad for him, to be honest with you. But you know, it is what it is. And the Chiefs deserved it. I mean, like we said, they did not give up. They kept fighting to the end. They have amazing talent. And so it's interesting. I don't know, Shona, if you can put this up on the screen. Chris asked over here, how big of an impact did the coaching staff have on the Super Bowl? It feels like Kansas City made the better halftime adjustments. Chris, 100%. And I think that as much as people laud the players because they're on the field, man, I wish MVP could have gone to Andy Reid, because I really feel like him and Eric Bieniemy, they made the adjustments they had to make in order to continue, you know, with the progress that they had already made despite the injury. I thought that was very well done. So I completely agree with that. And that's probably just age and wisdom, right? You know, with Andy,
you know, he is the wizard.
Well, yeah, I mean, he is. It'll be interesting to see what Eric Bieniemy does now that he's going to Washington.
So as a head coach, like, what does that guy need to do to get a head coach job?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I always am like, he keeps getting interviews, but he just doesn't get hired. And then there's all kinds of theories behind that, obviously. But at the same time, it'll be interesting that he has this assistant head coach. And there was a lot of people got real mad that he made this lateral move. And I'm like, he didn't. He's getting paid a hell of a lot more. Washington pulled up the Brinks truck to his house and decided to pay him, because I think that they can see him, you know, and Ron Rivera, you know, are, you know, being very good together. So that'll be very interesting.
Absolutely.
So that's really interesting. So yeah, so kudos to them for sure. I think that is great for Kansas City. It's great for this town. This town now, they have just won a Super Bowl. They're going to host the draft. They have the World Cup in 2026. So Kansas City is definitely on the map. You can't keep saying that we're forgotten. Fake chip on the shoulders, Chiefs. Don't make it up. It's not true anymore. So we'll see for sure. So it was an interesting season. It was really kind of fun. Lots of highlights. We have lots of quarterbacks to talk about now. You know, all of them going in, and a bunch of them, you know, free agents, the question marks surrounding Aaron Rodgers and his week in the hole. And we have, you know, Derek Carr. Here's what I want to ask you guys about. And I didn't tell you I was going to ask you guys about this. So I'm hoping for, you know, just off the cuff. We have two very different things happening with these quarterbacks right now. You have Daniel Jones in New York, who has stated without question he wants $45 million a year. That's how much. Now we're keeping that's much Patrick Mahomes wants to be paid. And then you have Derek Carr over there, the savvy businessman, going, really? I'll play for 35. It's like, oh, love this so much. That then in turn sets the tone for Geno Smith and Seattle Seahawks. And then you have Aaron Rodgers debating whether or not he's actually going to even play this year. He keeps saying, I swear it won't take very long to decide. Shut up. Just say yes or no and be done with it. We're over you, Aaron. So lots of drama surrounding that. What's been interesting so far is the Lamar Jackson aspect. They offered him a ridiculous amount of money. He wanted it all guaranteed. They said absolutely not, which I find very interesting. So there's a few caveats here. I want to hear from you guys about what you think about Daniel Jones, the difference between Daniel Jones and Derek Carr and the amount of money that they want. And then I'm going to ask you about Lamar and the guaranteed contract and what the owners are doing, which I find very interesting. So let's start with you, Liz. What do you think about Daniel Jones wanting $45 million a year, coming right off his rookie contract, finally made it to the playoffs? Real proud of you. Real proud of you, kid. You played well last year.
Yeah, bit of a Shania Twain. He don't impress me that much. Like, he just, obviously he's done really well. Fair play to him. Like, great season for him. But I don't feel like it guarantees like that kind of money. I don't know. That's a really interesting one. But there is a lot of silly money in the NFL now, so there are teams who will pay it. Yeah,
I don't know that the New York Giants are one of them, though. That's what's going to be interesting.
I don't think I don't mean to be horrible, but like, I feel like anyone could have done his job, really. Like, I don't think he's that great of. I just really don't think he's that great of a quarterback. Like,
I completely agree. He's only really shown this one season that he's been consistent. And even then there were still some icky games where you were like, oh, Daniel, you're kind of like reverting back to what you were before. And I feel like he's been so inconsistent, but he's gone, you know what, yet with his agent, who apparently thinks this is a great idea, that we're going to ask for 45 million per season.
Yeah,
and I guess I know why he's asked it, because NFL plays stupid money. But if you've got a guy like Derek Carr, who to me is a good quarterback and has been kind of shafted a bit with the Raiders and how they've drafted and how they've built around him, 100% I'd go for Derek Carr. I'd be like, on you go, Daniel, see what team's going to pay you, because it ain't going to be me.
Mm-hmm. I agree completely. What was fascinating to me is when we had heard little droplings that he wanted about 45 million. And I'm sure it's always this time of year, you hear a rumor, people straight out the agent's mouth. The agents are trying to vie for media time. Just know that. And so, he came out and he said that. And then 2 days later, I don't even think it was 2 days, Derek Carr announces he'll play for 35 million or a little more. You know what I mean? It's like, that was brilliant gamesmanship, because what it did is made Derek Carr very attractive to teams that maybe are a little tight on money or who are looking to have a bridge quarterback for a few years. And I agree with you, Shona. Derek Carr is the better quarterback of the two, in my opinion. And so no matter that that Daniel Jones's coach just won Coach of the Year, it doesn't matter. Derek Carr is just the better quarterback, but he's older. Yeah. And he's wiser. And so he's like, wait a minute, I know that I'm not going to be able to do this. And so I find that interesting that there's people who are like, no, there's an old school thought process and I say old school because it's going to go away very quick if these owners have anything to do with it. The old school process is the last quarterback to get a contract, the next quarterback needs to top it. They just need to keep going up, going up, going up. If you are even a starter, right? The interesting thing that happened is then Deshaun Watson's contract came out. Boom, you set the bar clear up here, right? And the owners are like, nope. All of them. I swear to God, they all got together on somebody's yacht somewhere and said, yeah, sorry, Jimmy Haslam, you are out of your damn mind. We are not going to play quarterbacks this amount of money, and we're not going to guarantee it all. And so there's a real tug, and you can feel that right now, especially with Lamar Jackson, of they're like, we'll give you money. We're not going to guarantee it, especially with his injury history. And I love him. But so there's going to be this push-pull, and it's going to have to be the quarterbacks that bend, because there's players like Derek Carr who come in and say, you know what? I'm not Lamar Jackson, but I'm going to cost you 15 million less a year. And that can build an entire team around me. Yeah. And that's huge. Absolutely. I think that's huge. So it's going to be interesting to see how some of this fall, and I know what's very interesting to us, the three of us, is how this then affects Geno Smith with Seattle. Geno Smith knows where he's at. He knows what he needs. He understands that he had this gap. He doesn't have the same pedigree. Graham says Stephen Ross's yacht is usually available for meetings. Yes, it is. Wink, wink. So, but I think that's going to be interesting, and that's going to probably pull that number back a little bit for Geno. I still expect him to get between 30 and 35 a year, but I think Derek Carr dropping that little nugget is going to have an impact on some others. So absolutely. Very interesting what's going on with the quarterbacks. Where do you see them landing? Liz, where do you see Derek Carr landing?
Honestly, I don't know. Like,
he's met with basically every team at the combine, apparently.
So then, it's one of those things, isn't it? Like, he'll fit in everywhere. That's absolutely fine. There's no doubt. I think he's good enough that he can fit in everywhere. It's down to who really needs him and who's really, I suppose, willing to play the game of, the whole Daniel Jones situation of, he knows their playbook. He's been there for a while. Derek Carr coming in would be a different scenario of trying to get used to it and then getting around it. It would be not a build year, but like a year where not everything you expect will happen straight away type thing. So I don't know. No idea.
Shona, what about you?
I see him in New York, but I see him at the Jets.
Mm-hmm.
I think that team have got amazing rookies and they've got a good, solid foundation. They're just slightly missing that piece with quarterback because, Wilson's just proved to be an absolute sort of bust and likes to blame everyone else apart from himself. Right. And obviously, you can't play Joe Flacco forever. So I see him, that's where I see him fitting the most. I feel like it's a team that, like I said, they've got a brilliant coach in Robert Saleh, and he gets those players wanting to play for him. And I feel like that's the kind of environment that Derek Carr sort of needs, which he hasn't been getting at the Raiders for goodness knows how long. Yeah. And I see that just fitting quite well is where I see it personally for me.
Yeah. The Jets make sense. I mean, they desperately need a veteran to come in there so they can build up the rest of that team, and then they can go get a new rookie in a couple of years. It makes total sense.
What about the rumors of like Aaron Rodgers going to Jets? Like, what do we think on that?
Honest to God, I think Aaron Rodgers is going to end up playing for Green Bay again for the 2 years and then retire. I think it's all just all ridiculous from him. Honestly, apparently the team's real over him though. So I don't know.
I would love someone just to give him a muzzle just for like the off season, just so I don't have to hear about him.
Yeah.
Until like August. Right. Give me a break until preseason, Aden, because I'm kind of over you.
Yeah.
No, I am over you.
So the other team that I think is maybe a little more likely than the Jets is actually the New Orleans Saints. And I can see that Graham said that also in our chat. So interesting to me is that maybe it's because he played for the Raiders and I'm used to seeing him in black, but in my mind, he just fits there. He just fits with the Saints. I think that they have a great team around him. All they need is a little more consistency at quarterback. No offense to Jameis Winston or Andy Dalton or all of the guys that they have playing quarterback. Mm-hmm. But I just think a little consistency and would be very good. Now the team does have some issues that they'll need to address, cap wise and a few other things. And I get real sad and real giddy at the same time at the thought of Cam Jordan being released for cap reasons and then him coming to play in Seattle makes me happy. But at the same time, I just see him fitting really well with Dennis Allen there. I just think it would be good. But neither team would surprise me, to be honest with you. Neither one would surprise me at all. So, yeah. Shona, can you put up Graham's comment about Rodgers? He says, Rodgers will not leave Green Bay. He just wants to stay in the spotlight until the season time. I completely agree.
It's Chris's that's cracking me up.
No, Chris's is better. I agree. Let's find this dark room.
To avoid hearing about it. Says maybe we should all go into a dark room in the woods just to avoid hearing about AR-12 for a few days. Amen, boys. That is just so true. And here's the thing.
Just turn it all off and you won't hear about him.
I think the thing of it is that he knows that he's the end of career and he's one of those guys kind of like Tom Brady who have a hard time letting go of that spotlight. And yet at the same time, he seems completely over it. But so I think it's a dueling ego thing. This ego wants him to go to Burning Man and be, run around in the desert. And the other one wants him to be on the field. And that's a lot of money to give up. I get it. But I think we can all agree he's past his prime and that team needs a complete rebuild. They need to start from the bottom up for sure. So absolutely. All right. I wanted to talk to you guys just a little bit so we're into the NFL Combine. The NFL Combine really, truly kicked off yesterday. It's been going on pretty much this entire week. But they've done measurements. A bunch of defensive players went yesterday. Today is wide receivers, tight ends, and quarterbacks. It's very interesting. It's on television here on the NFL Network. It's really interesting, but it happens every year in Indianapolis. And basically, for maybe our listeners in the UK who don't know exactly what the combine is, I don't know if you guys have this sort of thing for soccer for you guys, but they gather all the players together in one place. You have to be invited. And so all the top players come, they go through medical tests and assessment for every team to get. They go through all their heights and measurements. They do on-field drills. They do that very famous 40-yard dash, which everyone talks about. I mean, you get to see these players kind of compete against each other. They're not in pads. This is not like team on team. That's more of like the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl where you get to see them play against each other, those kind of all-star games, college all-star games. This is just more of a physical assessment. More importantly, the teams then have opportunities to meet privately with these players, interview them, get a chat with them, that sort of thing. Sometimes those questions are highly inappropriate. Other times, which they've come way back on, they're fixing that. And some teams are worse than others. But for the most part, they want to know who these kids are. Are you a competitor? What, kind of family do you come from? That sort of thing. But this is what happened. So let me see here. When did this come out? This was February 8th. This came out. And there's an article in ESPN. Said the NFLPA, so the NFL Players Association, their president, DeMaurice Smith, calls for an end to the NFL scouting combine. So I want to read some of this to you guys. And I know that's kind of boring. He shared his desire to abolish the combine and instead establish regional pro days or regional combines, essentially put on by the NFLPA. Keep that in mind for a minute. The response came after he was asked about NFL Executive Vice President of Football Operations, Troy Vincent's comparison of the combine to a slave auction during league meetings in December. That was huge here. Mm-hmm. So basically what he says is that the NCAA and the NFL to structure the combine during what should be every player's last semester in college, which is true. Most of these kids quit school in December so that they can go ahead and prepare for the combine. Who decided that was a good idea to take your son and have him exclusively try out for NFL's exclusive way of getting to the league? Unless you're, you have to be invited. And then as soon as you show up, you waive all of your medical rights. You not only have to sit there and endure embarrassing questions, and he said that was horrible. And you want to spend your son, have your son spend time. You don't want to have him spend hours inside of an MRI machine for each individual team. He only has to do it once at this one. But the constant pressure is just too much. He's very big, and the NFLPA, this is big right now, is on the player not having to surrender their medical rights to these teams. Because basically when you join the NFL, you sign everything over. And then what's interesting, he goes on to say that the players need to start learning that the combine has nothing to do with how fast they are, how high they can jump, and how much they can lift. And then they said, we've been tracking all of these players since they were in grade school or high school. And if I asked you right now to pull up a high school video of a top draft pick, it would take less than 30 seconds. So his whole point is this, that he really doesn't think that this is necessary anymore. Mm-hmm. These scouts are out and they're looking at these kids and you get everything online, everything that you need to see. Rarely does anything major change from their performance at the combine. I have two questions for you. Obviously, not just this happens at the combine. We have heard the Russell Wilson trade for Seattle last year happened at the combine. These teams get together. They're in private moments. They can talk about the draft. They can talk about trades. They can do all this stuff. So a lot of league business goes on here in Indy where there's not a ton of press. The other part is, you have those players who maybe went to a smaller school, who didn't get as much TV time, who all of a sudden stand out and shine at the combine, moves them right up the draft. How do you guys feel? Do you understand where he's coming from? Do you agree with him? Do you think the combine is a good thing and should stay? Shona, I'm going to start with you.
I kind of agree with them because we don't have anything like this over here. If you're talented, it's slightly different. Also, the structure in football is completely different to the NFL. If you're talented enough at a young age, you get into their youth academy and then you can rise up through the ranks and then you get to play, football. And the way that you get scouted is scouts will attend games and they'll watch you live in action. Mm-hmm. They can do that though with college games. They can go to college games if they're wanting to see these players, these kids play. And I feel like it is, I don't never really been a huge fan of the combine. I feel like because you can have one of your best days, as you've said, you're lower in the ranks when you do amazing. But then also you could be a really top prospect and you could have an off day at the combine and you fall and you drop and you're like, that doesn't make any sense because he's proved himself for 2 to 3 years in college. But you've decided on one day that he's not jumped high enough, that he's not good enough for your team. I think personally for me, I wouldn't care if it went, to be honest. I you know, there's players that got injured from it, and that's stopped their NFL careers from beginning. Like they've had to like essentially like wait until the next season, which is it's a dream crushing if that happened to you because you've decided to run a 40-yard dash as fast as you can. Personally, for me, I'm not a huge fan of it. And also, like, I remember watching the All or Nothing Michigan Wolverines documentary, and the lady, like the college advisor, was like, look, what does the NFL actually stand for? It stands for not for long. Like, you're not going to play in this sport for the rest of your life. You need to have like a college degree behind you. And these kids are quitting in December so they can go to the combine. Like, it needs to be a balance of both. Like, yes, you want to play in the NFL, but you got to think life post the NFL too. So to me, it wouldn't bother me that much if this wasn't here.
Liz, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm fully on board with that. I think that's right. I don't think it's necessarily needed. However, when you said that there are some players who don't get as much TV time or whatever, if you will, and then they shine in that moment, then they're sort of missing out. But then my head thinks at the same time, there are some coaches who are watching that and they're like, oh yeah, we've got no one else knows about this kid. We'll get them anyway. So I don't know. It's a tough one. I suppose in a way it probably wouldn't change too much if it suddenly didn't exist, if that makes sense. I think with the NFL, it's something that's just, I suppose, always been there, or certainly been there for a long enough time. But I do think it's right. It is a bit messed up. I don't think it's necessarily, the right thing. And kind of like Shona said, like, it's not how we've done it in football. It's not how we do it in rugby. It's you see people based on how they play. And you could have an off day at a game when the one time that the scout is there. So I don't know. I don't think there's any aspect. There is no good way of going around it. You know, there's only so many scouts, I guess. Yeah.
It is tough. I will tell you that I was lucky enough. I went to a regional combine. So they had one in Kansas City here a few years ago for players that weren't invited to the main combine. And they had a regional one here in Kansas City. And it was run just like the regular combine. Like they were out there throwing, out there doing drills, that sort of thing. It was much more intimate. And you could actually see the scouts talking with the kids while they were doing it. But it didn't take 4 days. You know, it was just they had every player on the field. So I get where they're coming from that. I think you might get a little bit of a better feel for some of these kids without the horde of press. Kate, who works at Our Turf football with me, she's at the combine right now for Our Turf. And she went in at 7:30 in the morning and there were 15 podiums set up. And there was a line to stand around Bryce Young's podium. And it's like, that kid is coming in here. He's got to do a job interview here in 2 hours, and he's being bombarded with questions. Where at the regional ones, it's a little smaller, a little more intimate. I get that. I also think they could see probably more kids, but it would take more time from the NFL players. So it's 6 of one, a half dozen of the other. I don't disagree with either side of it. But I do agree with the medical stuff. And that could be because I work in the medical field. You know, if there is something that is a detriment to a player playing football, then that should be able to be released. But all the rest of the stuff, that's none of your damn business. You know what I mean? Just let it go. Yeah, I get that for sure. So interesting. It'll be interesting to see if the NFL decides to wiggle a little bit and maybe change some things up. But because this is not a moneymaker for the NFL. You know, it's not like, you know, like the Pro Bowl or something. And so it's just kind of a way for all the teams to get together. And for some of these kids, you know, you get great moments out of the combine too, but it's at the same time, I get it. I kind of get it.
Yeah.
So
I suppose it's made to entertain people in a way, right?
For sure.
Same almost goes with the draft. The draft could actually just be a notice board with everyone's bloody name on it. It doesn't have to be dragged out for 4 days of who may or may not get called up and that kind of stuff. Like, it's a pretty... I feel like it's almost like a little bit humiliating if you're there for 4 days hoping that you might just get picked out and then never do get picked. Like, it could be done very quickly, but it's done in a way so that it's entertaining for fans. Like, that's the thing I've noticed about the NFL. It's cool as a fan that it's all about the fans. Don't necessarily know that that's, you know, necessarily the right way to go about it.
Right.
But as a fan, I'm there watching it, whatever.
It's a show.
It's a bit archaic. It's a bit archaical for me. You know, it's like, remember when we used to have animals in a circus and like they were forced to perform? It kind of has the same vibe as that for me. And, you know, it's like forcing these kids to try and prove their worth to get an NFL draft spot. Well, the teams will probably know who they're looking at and who they want to go for.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion.
But keep in mind, this is their job. They get paid insanely well to do it. And even the college kids get paid for that now. And that's why so many of them, there are so many good quarterbacks that decided to go back to school one more year because of NIL, because of they can get paid in college now with endorsements. And I think that's great because then they're more than likely to get their degree, which I love that. Right. But I understand what you're saying, Shona, and I don't disagree. But at the same time, this is a job interview. That job just happens to have a lot of physicality to it. But the way they put it on display, I do agree with you on that completely. I get that. I do get it. It's tough. And, you know, me, I like to watch it. I put it on Twitter today. I love defensive drills. I just love to watch them do it. It's like they're so fast and so fun. And maybe they like that, you know, but then I always think to myself, maybe they just need to ask the players what they want to do, you know, let that be up to them instead of the bureaucrats. But they don't really do that so much in the NFL. So yeah, it's crazy. So any other stories that have caught your eye or any players that you're excited to watch in the combine?
See, I'm really useless. I don't get into, I'm not gonna lie, I don't get into college football that much. It's just too much of it going on. So I've got no idea who's even in it, unless, for example, you were in, what's the program, Last Chance U or QB1 or anything like that. And even then, like, the way they are set is like still years before a draft anyway. So yeah, I'm out on that question.
I get a bit more excited like towards draft time, like, and that's when I start really looking at like who the top prospects are and like who I think like where teams are going to go. That's why I like kind of guessing before the draft, kind of like before the draft pick goes ahead. So that's where I get a bit more into it, when it's in the lead up to the draft. I just feel sorry for Bryce Young, because in my head, I just keep thinking about the guy from 13 Reasons Why called Bryce, and it's, you know, it's not the same.
Definitely not the same.
But I just keep going, oh, Bryce Young, yeah, the guy from 13 Reasons Why. And everyone's like, no, Shona, the quarterback. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right.
Right.
Sorry.
Well, I will tell you, I'm not a huge college football fan, just because much for the sake, there's so many, and I have a hard time keeping track. I watch my alma mater, Montana State. I watch a few other teams. I watch the big bowl games because then you get a nice feel for some people. So many of these prospects decide not to play in the bowl games, so then that makes it a little hard. But one thing I will have you do, I have learned so much this year. So as you guys know, I do another podcast, Seahawks podcast. It's called Real Hawk Talk, and it's in the group with the Hawk Blogger boys. Their GMs in our DM, we have this group chat on Twitter, just us, and they're trading players and trading spots and this player and that player and who stood out and who did that. And I'm just looking, I Google it. I've learned so much. And let me tell you, we should all be really excited about the tight end group in this draft. They look amazing. We should calm down about the quarterback group in here, because there's not as many good ones as we thought. And this is a defensive draft. It's like,
I think it was too.
Shooting fish in a barrel. There's so many great players in this one. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So my suggestion to maybe those listening who don't get into it as much, start looking at the mock drafts, watch these highlights of this combine. I think you'll start to see some names that are real familiar and look really good to you. Like yesterday, out of nowhere, Nolan Smith popped off. He looked fantastic, looked great. And then you hear the next day, okay, yeah, but what about this one? And then you start finding all these comparisons, and it's really fun and interesting. So do that. But next up, we have the draft, and that's super exciting because it's here in Kansas City. I love the draft too. It's a lot of fun to be at. And so the draft is really exciting. And And so that's what these guys are working for. And they're going to spend time with teams, and they're going to spend time chatting, and their agents are going to put a lot of stuff out there, and then we'll kind of see what happens. We haven't even touched on Jalen Carter, which we don't have time for today, but and that whole situation, because I have a real opinion about that one. But there's going to be lots of drama and lots of news to come out about these players. True, maybe not true, don't know, between now and then. So I always say, just, hold your opinion until the draft and you see him on the field. So, all right, everyone. Go ahead.
We're actually on my Hindu when it's the draft.
Oh, it is. Oh, Shona, you and I can watch it.
Although the girls will be like, "Why are you watching?" I'll be like, "Shh, the draft's on."
It's the draft,
I
guys.
know.
It's the draft.
I'm assuming your Hindu, that's a bachelorette party, correct?
Bachelorette, yeah.
Okay, bachelorette, yeah. What the hell is that? Okay.
Yeah. We all have Hindu over here.
I know you do. Okay.
We're hens until we're not hens. I don't really understand.
Still a hen.
I don't understand either. Hens and stags, like, why did we get hens and they get stags? Like,
why do we have like a little chicken that like bops its head and they get a stag, like this gallant animal, and we get a hen that lays eggs? Is that all we're good for?
That was something cute, like. Whatever.
Hey, think of it this way, ladies. Eggs are football shaped.
I'm calling it unicorns.
There you go.
Unicorn do.
Unicorn too. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening this time. We'll be back. We don't know when. We'll figure it out. We're on and off throughout the entire off season, but we'll definitely be back before the draft. We'll probably be back around the new league year, which starts, I think it's the 15th of March this year, because those first couple of days of the new league year, that's when all your trades happen. That's when all the good stuff happens with your players who are already in the league, before we lean to the players who are not quite there. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day.